What is a DMT trip like?
Oh man. Um, so surprisingly, it was natural. It felt innate. It felt like something that was experientially similar to something maybe I experienced as a child. So as profound as these experiences are, and as profound as life-changing and transformative as my first DMT experience was, there was something about it that really was remembering something of the past. So that aspect and the fact that it is endogenous, produced naturally, in your own body, I think there's something there to be explored about what it's actually connecting us to. But the I guess shorter oh shit answer is it blew my mind. All of my senses went completely nuts, and I had a life-changing epiphany perspective shift. We can pick that apart as you'd like.
Yeah, tell me about your life. What brought you to it? What did DMT do for you?
So we mentioned before recording about one of the reasons why I'm excited to speak with you and honestly your generation. And I speak about my niece all the time. She's about your age and kind of exploring the same topics. Um, is honestly the fact that you haven't experienced 45 years of life. And I had my proverbial midlife crisis at 41 years old, and everything in my life absolutely blew up. And I go over my story in podcast as well as in my book because I really want to outline some bullet points. Was that I really was raised with a silver spoon. I had every advantage possible. I went to an amazing college. I had a great family. I was supported in every way possible. But uh, I was a drunk, narcissistic, belligerent asshole that burned everything to the ground. And over the course of about 2 years or so, I just had an amazing string of horrible events. Really ending with me threatening to kill a guy and losing my job and becoming homeless after having truly every material good possible. And I had to do some real dark, deep inner work. And I started out with shrooms. Several months of really doing that therapeutic, intentional work with shrooms. And then I felt as though I needed to kind of push it a bit further, and that's when the DMT came in. But the truth was, um, I was in a really dark, suicidal, anxious, depressed place where at that point, it wasn't that I had a bad day or a bad week. I was really making the educated, conscious decision is if I wanted to stay on this planet or not. And at that point, I was ready to check out. And I'd really been hearing quite a bit about the therapeutic value of psychedelics in general and how it was helping a whole, range of people. And at that point, I figured, I've got nothing to lose, and I really kind of dove into it. And I do, if I may, want to asterisk with it. I'm 4.5 years sober from alcohol, and speaking to a young college guy, and I know that's part of a lot of that social scene. Being sober now from alcohol was a huge, huge catalyst as well. I did not have a healthy relationship with that molecule, so those two things allowed me to hold the mirror up to myself, which then I could start rebuilding my life.
It's kind of fascinating that shrooms weren't enough, but DMT was. So, what was it about DMT?
Well, the difference um, was profound, and both psychedelics both elevate your senses. But for me anyway, shrooms allowed me to do, and you speak about Jung and his work all the time. It really allowed me to do that dark inner shadow work. And I think with psychedelics in particular, how they worked for me and for a lot of people is that they find that crack in your psyche that only you know is there. So you can lie to your friends, you can lie to your girlfriends, you can lie to your therapist. At one point I was paying a highly educated therapist $240 an hour, and not that I was bullshitting him, but I was going there trying to hype up this story about woe is me, and I'm so intellectually advanced and I've got all these things happening. Look at all of my successes, and everybody else is the asshole. And I was always looking for external solutions to all of my internal problems, and the shrooms really held that mirror up where you're forced to be on truth serum. And honestly, there's no way you can lie to yourself when you're looking in an actual mirror, in metaphorical mirror, when you're on 5 grams of shrooms. And for better or for worse, it allowed me to finally take ownership of all of the crap in my life, and all of the truly the lives that I destroyed. I mean, I lost 3 beautiful women that in retrospect did nothing wrong but try to love me. I lost amazing jobs. I lost all of my wealth. I lost multiple houses. Any position and clout that I had in my, neighborhood was thrown out the window. So it was, it was a rebirth that I needed to happen. But until I took ownership of all the shit that I did, and, analogy I use quite often is that, just living a life of dealing with society and all the stuff you have to go through, you just build up plaque and crap that kind of cakes on. And for me, psychedelics was what removed all of that plaque. And that was a twofold benefit, where not only could I now shine my unique, beautiful light, and I could be the creative, intelligent, professional being and lover and loving person that I was, but as important, I was able to then receive the light and love and information from the universal source as well, whatever you call that, whether it's God, whether it's Jesus, whether it's, however you interact with that. Once that plaque was blasted off, I could be my raw, authentic self and interact with every other being around me in a way that I hadn't for 20 adult years. And it's since then, you asked how I was before I recorded. Truth is awesome. And it's been like that for 3.5 years. Full of contentment, bliss, connection, and yeah. That's why I love talking to people like you, to try to say if somebody's in a dark, shitty place where they're fighting their demons and, don't think that there's a way out, there is. And disclaimer, and we talked about this a little bit before even, connecting with one another. I don't think psychedelics are for everybody. DMT is definitely not for everybody. I think you can attain these types of inner knowledge and self-love from many other ways, whether it's a spiritual endeavor, whether it's religion, whether it's yoga, breathing exercises. There's many other ways of doing it, but it comes from the ability to look within and have that interaction with yourself that is crucial. And for me, psychedelics, like I said, was kind of the gateway that allowed that to happen. And that process is the transformation part, not the psychedelics. That's not a magic pill. That doesn't, it shines light on the bullshit. It doesn't fix the bullshit.
Yes. Yeah, with bullshitting yourself, it's so easy to do this. And, it's been a while since I've taken these kinds of things, and then it's your psyche, because it's the way you interact with the world, like naturally kind of things go into the background, into the unconscious, and so why?
And that's not necessarily a negative thing. It allows you to survive, right? I mean, those are mechanisms that allow us to survive in this society. So it's not that that's all negative. It's just how you interact and understand those parts of you, and don't let anyone lead. That's a destructive one anyway.
So what does it mean when you say it shines a light on you and your mind? What specifically is going on in that experience?
So I mentioned how alcohol, unfortunately, was a part of my life before, and it just seemed like that was an easy way to sweep things under the rug and hide from the difficult conversations. So, there were things festering in my relationships, things with my health, 40 pounds overweight, drinking 10 drinks a day, constantly screaming with people that I was supposed to, be forming my life with, being miserable at work, all of the things. And, I was that guy that every day was miserable and pissed off, yelling at people at the car, going to the market being mad, going to the gym being mad. And, finally, and again, that mirror that's held to you, if every day, all day, you think everybody around you is the jerk, the asshole that's doing everything wrong, that doesn't know how to drive, that doesn't know how to, it's like maybe you're the asshole that needs to take a step back and chill. And to shine the light on that crap, it was just why the one thing I have control over. And I guess that epiphany moment that happened in that DMT space. So Shrooms allowed, I think, the inner psyche work, the confronting of the demons, the acknowledgement of where you were wrong. But then that also morphed into, okay, acknowledge that. But then there's a lot of positive there too. So it wasn't, and it's not dissolving the ego and getting rid of the ego. It's allowing the ego to have its voice, to let it state its piece and have a seat at the table. But know that it's a seat at the table, and that you appreciate the advice, but ultimately you're in control. So it was a matter of understanding the different parts of me, but then understanding and the epiphany with the DMT. And it was a hell of a session. And one of the bullet points that kind of gets pointed out on a lot of my interviews was, I took 50 hits of DMT that first day, And I know that sounds extreme, and like how was that even possible? But it was about an hour and a half period where I did 6, 7 sessions, and each session was multiple hits that added about to that up. And that's another aspect about DMT that's very unique to psychedelics, is that trip state is 7, 8 minutes, 10 minutes top, and then you're back to full lucidity. You can integrate what happened, kind of try to process it, and then push it again further. So you can have years and years of therapy. I mean, you can have, people take, several years to go on several weekend retreats. I mean, you can have all those sessions in an afternoon. And as those progression of those trips move through, the last one is when everything changed. So all of the fancy sights and sounds stopped, all of the spinning mandalas, all of the vibratory hum, all of those things that you hear people about the DMT space explaining. And it is beautiful. It is absolutely sensationally stimulating and profound, and everything's dialed up. But that last session, everything stopped. I felt as though I was in a suspended state where I wasn't falling, I wasn't ascending, being rocketed through any portal. I was just there, and I had a conveyance of information where it was, stop trying to connect all the past and all the bullshit that you went through. Stop trying to figure out how you're going to rebuild the future and trying to connect all those dots. And it's a corny kind of one-liner, but it was all kind of be here now in this very moment. And not only moment, but second and millisecond. And the combination of taking ownership of everything that I had done, good and bad, and understanding, taking stock of where I was, and then the combination of DMT kind of saying, this is all you got is right here, and take advantage of that. And those two things was that epiphany, that change, and that was the day that, again, not that all my problems were fixed, but it was the day that I stopped banging my head against the wall. It was the day that I stopped being destructive to myself. It was the day that I stopped being my own worst enemy, and I started being my best asset. And from that day forward, all of my relationships have been increased and amazing. My physical, mental, spiritual health have all increased. Writing of the book has opened so many doors. I've been able to experience so many cool things and meet cool people, and now my life of being wrapped up in alcohol, money, material things, and surface relationships is now completely 180-degree difference to exploring the topics that you find interesting. Altered states of consciousness, religion, spirituality, psychology, philosophy, and yeah. So it went from being a pent-up jerk that pissed off everybody, and like I said, culminated in me getting a restraining order against me, getting kicked out of my home, in a separate incident, threatening to kill another guy over a work incident, and having to take stock at, who the hell am I? And that's the first chapter of my book, and I use a vulgar term because I think you really need to have that pop and snap, which is the title chapter is who the fuck am I? And that was the day that I looked to the universe and pleaded. And it wasn't to a certain God, it wasn't to some, Gnostic being or energy or any, it was just a plea for help. It was, I need something, and I can't do this alone. And the truth is I get answered. And by what, by whom, by whatever. But now, like I said, several years into this exploration, and I've done DMT, over 100 times, hundreds of times, and I've had some amazing experiences. And some would just sit back and relax and enjoy the show, and some are profound interactions with entities, archetypes, alien-like beings, mantis, the whole realm of these outside external entities, which, again, before we started recording, some of these well-established, credentialed psychiatrists and people that are helping with not only mental health issues, because I want to separate it. It's not people that are necessarily sick or traumatized or had depression or anxiety like I did. This can happen to relatively normal people, is interactions with, like I said, non-corporeal, non-physical beings that, how do I, and I don't act like I know what they are, and I don't think anybody does with full humility, but that's the exciting thing, is if you accept that as truth, and I do, it's like, now what? Like, you can't unsee that. You can't unfeel that. You can't undo the downloads of information that you received. You can't, I've had an interaction with I considered was my future self, where it was a very clear, comforting diagnostic check from my consciousness or soul. Like, again, how do you say that to a young man like you and not sound crazy and have your audience be like, wow, I'm not doing DMT because of that. But when you look back at the ancient text in the esoteric wisdom teachings and, you know, the beginnings of a lot of the religious texts, it starts with very similar interactions with these entities, all with self-exploration and looking within. And you tap into something greater than.
I noticed that you first were talking about the change that the experience invoked in you, your life, the confrontation with yourself, almost like it's indescribable, ineffable. And so what really else is there to describe but the change that it kind of led in you? But then you're now talking about, well, specifically, you know, entities that I encountered that I didn't understand what they were, or something that seemed to be my future self. And so then that's kind of interesting to then tap into the details of, like, you know, what specifically is it about these experiences that make it life changing, you know, like and maybe there's many different kinds of experiences that would do that.
And I think what you're trying to peel apart too is where's the separation of that? So where is the separation between different aspects of yourself, different parts of yourself, and even different split personalities? And then, you know, when is it something other than? And a painful recognition that I just had even last week, I was listening to a powerful podcast with my girlfriend, and they were talking about being in a relationship with a narcissistic person and how manipulative they can be and how controlling, and just all of the ugly aspects of that. And I'm listening to this podcast, and it was everything that I did to the women I was with, but I also did it to me. And ultimately, that's typically, if somebody's acting like a jerk and it has all of these negative clouds around them, that's normally a reflection of themselves, and you know, they're projecting all of that anger on other people because they have that internal anger. And you know, that's what was happening with me, was that I was my own worst enemy. And after watching those podcasts, I was like, fuck, I was the victim of a narcissist, but I was the narcissist. Like, all of the damage that they talk about these individuals doing, not only did I do it to my loved ones and the women I was with, and they, unfortunately, their kids, but I was caught up in all of that. So there was this weird separation of, like, the old narcissist Adam and the new kind of, like, exposed person who isn't that anymore. But I knew it was myself, you know. So I don't act like alcohol possessed me, or I was under the influence all the time, or that I had some sort of possession. That was just me clouded with funk and Adam being a jerk. The interaction with your future self, or, you know, there is really a sense of timelessness when you go into these DMT spaces, where you do feel as though, you know, you have led past lives and have interacted with energies in previous ways. So there's this back and forth interaction that seems to be separate from the physical Adam. And maybe as a personal, like, how it is applied to my life, part of my daily prayers is I get up and I kind of say my routine to several entities and beings that I feel as though I should honor. But then I always end it with an Ather. Right now I'm 45 years old, so it's Earth Adam 45, and then I say something about myself that's happened. Whatever, you're an amazing author. You're a sexy bastard that just went her. Whatever, you know, you could say anything, but knowing that and appreciating that it's Earth Adam 45, that it's just me in this body at this particular time, and I need to differentiate that from the bigger, higher self that is timeless, that does blend back in and transmute back into this higher energy or bigger energy field. And the interaction with those separate entities of myself is very distinct, and it doesn't happen all the time, and it's not like that's something that I can just tap into all the time. But when it does happen, it's kind of the same thing. Like, you know, if you've felt Christ consciousness, if you had a true conversation with Jesus, God, or whoever you connect with, how do you just, you know, that's not just your internal thinking, that's not just you having an internal dialogue. Like, you have that every day, all day. The whole point of that something different is that it's just that, it's something different. It gives you goosebumps and it changes everything. And that's what you're able to. And ultimately, what I think DMT does from a very practical standpoint, whether you're pro or against psychedelics, is that it removes the veil to our human, or the ability for our human to really tap into all of our potential. And I think we have way more than our five senses. I think we can dial up our five senses to limits that are way beyond what our normal walking state allows. But then there are other senses, and I don't think anybody has all the names for them. But things like telepathy and the ability to communicate across distances, and the concepts of quantum physics, where there's a concept of entanglement, where things are just interacting in a way that we can't quite explain. And I guess I've had so many of those inexplainable or unexplainable interactions that it's like, how do I just go every day now just worrying about bills or buying fucking bread or worrying about the mundane shit that I did for 41 years of my life, because I've seen all of this other amazing stuff on the other side, so to speak. But it's all within too.
It's interesting, I suppose, when you do the experience, it feels very natural and real, like that this stuff could be explained as strange entities or relating to yourself from the past or the future. It's just like not quite scientifically, philosophically, we have it, or maybe very far from understanding it. Yeah, I'm like, with the.
But now, and believe me, I don't, and I'm still trying to figure out how I even talk about it in an intelligent way. But you do listen to people now that are coming out, that are trained scientists that have had some of these really unique experiences. So there's a guy in the States called Mike Masters, where he has a concept about basically that, like, a lot of these alien interactions are just that us from our future selves, and from a biological standpoint, the natural progression of us would go to the shapes of what a lot of these people are explaining as aliens. And he'll be the first to say it's not proven, and it's a theory, but there are intelligent people that are willing to put their kind of credentials and PhDs on the line, because in his particular case, he's had some incredible stories. And I'm at the point where it's like, these people are either bullshitting and telling these outlandish stories to get attention, and I'm sure there's a certain percentage of people that are doing that. But I've had enough personal experiences and am close enough to people that have no reason to lie, and the similarities between some of the experiences where there's enough there to keep exploring, that there is something else to connect with. And I guess this is where it's just what language you use. So if you're talking to a religious scholar, they can use different language from a biological scholar, from a psychonaut, from whatever. But I think it's really just trying to describe the undescribable. What is this beautiful, wonderful world where all this weird stuff happens?
Do you think these experiences make one religious or believe in God?
I think they have to. So I went to college for 7.5 years, and majority of that was studying entomology. So I was working on West Nile virus and Triple E, and I was a bug geek that really just kept diving farther and farther into the most tiny, quote unquote, primitive insects. And at that point, I didn't think you could be a sound scientist and religious. I didn't think you could have faith in the unprovable or whatever and be an entomologist. I thought they were contradictory. When I got out of college and I started studying kind of all of the world's religions, and not in a deep way, but just on a surface level, I found more similarities than differences, and I found it was really just a matter of semantics on how you describe it. And then it went from studying religions to more spiritual kind of teachings, to esoteric teachings, to then this exploration of the psychedelic space. And it's really just a compounding set of evidence where somehow, some way, we all end up at the top of this proverbial mountaintop with this recognition of a higher being, a connection to it, a recognition that our self has something greater than, whether you call it a soul, whether you and again, that's where you can kind of get lost and you almost dumb it down. But again, you feel that, whether it's sitting in a pew in a church, or whether it's watching the sunset, or whether it's looking in the eyes of a newborn baby, or again, there's so many ways to feel that. But when you feel it, it's there.
a part of your book that really stuck with me was you describing how a DMT experience made you consider that every difficult thing you've been through or whatever, there's a reason for it, or at some level, you're meant to go through it. I mean, I might be putting words in your mouth, but yeah, I mean, I don't know if I believe that, but it's fascinating.
Well, so there's more to it than just, in hindsight, you can kind of say, oh yeah, I learned that lesson, or that everything necessarily happens for some divine reason. It's more leaning into it that, and I use the analogy about gaining like Girl Scout badges or Boy Scout badges, that every time you walk through or go through these hardships, you come out of the other side, wherever you were broken comes out stronger, and you do have that badge or T-shirt, or again, whatever, feather in your cap, however you want to word it. And I just stopped running from those, and knowing that if there's a lesson to be learned, if there's a weak point in my whatever aspect of my body, whether it be my physical body, my spiritual body, or my mental, if something comes across me that triggers a response, I won't run from it. And again, a really good, I think, simple analogy is that I started listening to the stressor signals in my body, where like a car dashboard, where you have all the things that come up, but in my life and a lot of people, they wouldn't change the oil, they wouldn't check the tire pressure, they wouldn't do all the things that the indicator lights are saying. Instead, they just cover them up and ignore them. And I guess now what I've done is realize that all of those things that happened were just indicator lights and these blinking, blaring things, where if I just would have listened to my intuition, if I just would have had that difficult conversation, if I just would have done something different, or recognized the blaring sign, again, and whether it be from an internal sign or some outside entity giving me that sign, I now put everything into perspective. And it could be as simple as, oh shit, you missed the exit, and instead of getting upset that you added 10 minutes to the trip, maybe you missed hitting a deer, or you missed an accident, or your favorite song's going to come on. And you kind of just go through the flow of life now. I'm not so much pushing Adam's plan, because that plan got thwarted and fucked up so many times, and that caused me truly to not want to be on this planet anymore. Where it's like, I feel like if I keep driving another Adam's plan, and that doesn't mean don't be motivated, don't be driven, don't have goals. If anything, just the opposite. I'm the most I've ever been in all those categories. It's more just a surrendering to what's going to happen, because now in my bald, gray-bearded age, I can look back at all of those things and say that they did all happen for a reason. And some things took full circle, where the first woman that broke my heart in my early 20s, we were together 7 years, we had a house, the bulldog, we were 2 months before our wedding date, we split up. I hadn't talked to her for 15, 16 years. I now work at the same company as her as one of my side gigs. We're friends, and I get to be part of her life again. And it's like full circle shit, where I don't know. When I was your age and I experienced that was the woman that did me wrong, and screw her, and all relationships suck, and women are horrible, and I had a laundry list of how she did me wrong, where now I can hug her and say happy birthday to her and put everything in perspective. And I feel as though that will continue when I'm 65. The things that happen now at 45, I'm not going to be so bent out of shape. And maybe that's a survival mechanism, because every material good that I had prior, I don't have right now. The wealth that I had, I don't have. The freedom I had, I don't have. So part of it is I don't have a choice. I could be the angry guy that's pent up and upset about all of the things that happened, or I can be the guy that skips and sings and dances through being a landscaper for $20 an hour when I used to make $1,000 a day. We talk about how we're both tired. I did three jobs this week, working close to 80 hours, and it's like, and I wasn't bitching or moaning at any of them. Just the opposite. I was the guy lifting everybody's kind of spirits up, because I'm alive. I'm alive, I'm here, I'm present. I have just this moment, and I'm accountable for everything I do. And one thing I'm accountable for is my perspective on life. And I can decide to be anxious or depressed or upset or yelling or screaming or dulling my pain with alcohol, or I can be smelling the flower, hugging the woman, and as you're I don't want to put words into your mouth, but a potentially stressed college student who's working on their PhD that has a lot going on. There are moments when your body just doesn't feel good, it's overworked, and it's giving you signals to be like, hey man, you got to back down or back off. And living in this type of energy vibe where I'm comfortable and content, everything is done. Like, I don't let anybody into my space that I don't want. And that's not like, oh, I just do what I want. It's more just, I listen to my body when things are off, and it just feels good. Like, it feels so much better to be sober than drunk. It feels so much better to be connected than disconnected. It feels so much better to know that you're not alone and that you have friends, family, and God to have your back. And it's ultimately, that's the message I'm trying to share. Not necessarily, oh yeah, go smoke 50 to DMT and you'll be fixed, because that's not it. It's more, go for the long walk in the woods and do the inner journey. And if you need that plaque removal, potentially psychedelics could be that.
Yeah, I would love to know more about whether psychedelics are necessary, or like, if they're so valuable for your life and for many people's, like, were they done at many times in history, and if people not doing it, like, is it a modern thing as well? Like, maybe the world around us is sort of, I don't know, we've lost a lot of rituals, we've lost religion, so there's and there's a deep way in which we kind of are cold maybe to these experiences now in our society.
Yeah. I don't think psychedelics is the only key to the lock. Ultimately, the message that I'm sharing, and again, a lot of people are coming from it from different other avenues, is that we as human beings are almost unlimited in our potential, that we can vibrate and interact in a higher way that is about love and connection. And again, I'm trying to be that guy that looks, the gnarly tattooed guy like myself that talks like I do with a New England accent, to be comfortable saying it's about love and connection. It's about complimenting and loving your neighbor, not about divisive speech and all of that crap. And so there's many ways of unlocking that human potential, and deep inner yoga work, holotrophic breathing. And we threw out the word endogenous at the beginning about how DMT is naturally produced, not only in humans, but my understanding all mammals. It's in pretty much every plant that is again, that they're finding it in more plants than not. And you are able to, through breathing and meditation techniques, induce your own DMT. And I've done it, and I can say smoking externally DMT, what it tastes like, what it feels like, how it makes your body vibrate, and then trying to make your body produce it itself. It's the same thing. It's very similar. It's the same thing. It's not to the level where you're gonna have a breakthrough, like blast off and interact with the entities. But the first time I did it after smoking, and I really tried to get into that meditative state, one of the similarities is you get this like nasal drip sensation in the back of your throat, and it's not snot, and it's not nasal cavity. It's a different liquid that tastes like DMT. And unless you've smoked DMT, you wouldn't really know. It's a really unique flavor and taste. But that was it. And as I'm sitting there breathing, I'm like, holy shit, your body can release this. So it's not necessarily mutually exclusive. Like, do you need psychedelics or not? Even without externally smoked DMT, you may still be having a DMT trip just because your body is actually producing, physiologically that chemical. And that's not just me saying that or being like, oh, I hope that's so. There's enough studies now that, prove that DMT is produced and produced in levels that are significant. But I guess, again, to answer your question, what are the other modalities? And I think that's going to be unique to age, to culture. There's an institute in the U.S. called the Monroe Institute, where they use binaural beats. Their program's called, technology is called hemisync technology, where that's a place where you go and do deep meditation for a week. They use headphones to kind of induce certain vibrations in your brain, and it was amazing. I left there, really aware that my body was more than my physical being. That I could use. I had another tool in my toolkit. The last DMT session I did, I get a very clear message about needing to do a darkness retreat. So, that's been brought up to my attention recently about there are places where you can go where it's complete absence of light for 3, 4, 5 days, a week. I don't think I could do a week, but start off with a couple of days. And the concept is that, similar to like fasting with your body, it learns how to metabolize and do things in your body in a different way. Where if you remove light and external light from your brain, and the only way of having of light produced is from internally, my understanding is you have almost psychedelic trips in these darkness retreats. And is it the same as like the Eleusinian mysteries where they were going into the caves? Is it similar to, you mentioned, is it needed? So there's the soma, the drink that they used to make, and the calcilion is another, concoction that they used to use, and even just cannabis, smoking weed, all of these things, or even just, again, meditative state, fasting. We talk about how tired we are. Now, we go 3, 4, 5 days without sleep, forced, to be awake. I guarantee you, we're going to be talking to weird shit, and our body's going to become hypersensitive to something. And I guess that's the thing, is that there are multiple ways to increase the sensitivity of our human senses, through drugs, through meditation, through deprivation, through all of these things. But are those experiences and interactions real? And yes, I think subjectively, in my own personal experience, they are. But from everything I've read for thousands of years of recorded history, and all of the current research shows that, yes, our body can do way more. An interesting podcast that's come out is called the Telepathy Tapes, where this woman is really getting into the ability of nonverbal autistic children to communicate with one another, through vast distances, but also to nonverbally communicate with their teachers, with their parents. And she makes a very compelling case. And it doesn't seem like these kids are making it up, and it doesn't, it's really, she does a really good job and brings in some really sound experts. And again, if that's true, if any one of these things are true, so if there's ghosts, if there's aliens, if there's DMT entities, if there's these archetypes that people on your show have said, yeah, there's some external something there. If any one of those things have even a small remote possibility of being true, it changes everything. And for somebody that's interacted with a majority of those things, it's changed my life. And it's not even necessarily better or worse. It's more just an understanding that there's something beyond just this, however you want to describe that.
There's
not
loads
the most
of things
profound
there.
philosophic statement, but there's more to this than
No.
that. That's what DMT allows you to say.
Yeah, it's with DMT specifically, you put it up that it's endogenously produced, and it's a very simple molecule. And I find that fascinating. And you said it also feels like going back to a childlike state. It feels very innate. Why do you think it then can have such powerful experiences if it's so simple?
I think the simplicity and the power is that it makes you remember your past. It's not adding anything necessarily. It's more exposing and, again, removing the veil. Where, and you asked at the beginning about the difference between shrooms and DMT. So if you're in the middle of a shroom trip, you still know that it's your body in this weird psychedelic state, but it's still your eyes seeing the weird whale on the wall. The whale's not there, but the wall's there, and something's going on, but you're still aware that your body is kind of poisoned, and you're still in it. Where DMT is really something where you're not dumbed down, you're not drugged, you're elevated, you're heightened, you have so much more data points. And anybody interested in DMT, probably the first person they're going to come across is Rick Strassman. So he did a study in the 90s where he had many volunteers over a prolonged period, and the common terminology that they kept saying was, it's more real than real. And they were coming out with these same things, transformative, life-changing realizations, and all subjectively different, but the grand scheme was, holy shit, this is more real than real. And I try to describe that or justify it as If you take a 7-minute experience right now in our normal walking state, say you get 100 data points. If you do that same 7 minutes in a DMT state, you're going to get a million data points, a trillion data points. I mean, however hyperbolic I want to be, it's just you're going to get so much more data, including the original 5 senses dialed up at 10. But then you're going to get so much more. So how can it be? You can see how it could be more real than real just because it's that many more data points. It's that much more information that you can use to process to figure out what that 7 minutes just was. And not necessarily exactly, but similar to Aldous Huxley's like reducing valve theory. And he was a psychologist, I believe, or psychiatrist that used mescaline and realized that as soon as you kind of open up that reducing valve and filter, that you start seeing such a wider bandwidth of not only the electromagnetic spectrum, but you start getting in all other sorts of stuff. So is it X-rays, is it gamma rays, is it TV rays, microwaves? Again, I don't know what all these things are, but you can see how with the right tweak of your antenna, just similar to a radio or TV, you can take the penetrating vibrational information that's through the air right now. With the right filter or antenna, you can take in that information. And DMT breathing meditations, they allow you to increase your filter, change your channel, add whatever, but it's taking in more, not altering what comes in and changing it with, I think, certainly alcohol does, certainly, I think shrooms do as well, where DMT just exposes that much more.
If DMT can make walking completely different, simple activity, you see way more of what it is, of what you are, everything is much deeper. Is that always a good thing? Can that be, is that always helpful? So this is, simple activity, explodes.
Absolutely. No, that's a fantastic question. So 2 parts of that. Like, would I want to be in a heightened, elevated state where my senses are dialed up all the time? Absolutely not. That's what drives people crazy. And like we discussed earlier, I believe it is a survival mechanism. I mean, we can't take in all of the information. We can't take it, and just the ones we know of, let alone all the other ones that we're not even aware of. So I wouldn't want to be hyper elevated and hypersensitive the entire time, because it would just be too chaotic. But part of going into the DMT space is some of these interactions, all these archetypal energies, is they show you how to use your body truly to its fullest potential. So I've had interactions with it that's showing you how to breathe and absorb oxygen properly, how to pump your blood properly, how to move temperatures around your body properly. And they're real experiences, and they're profound, because it's like they're going in and showing you how to drive your race car to its fullest potential. So when you come back into the non-DMT state, you know that your body can do more. You felt what it can do. So you can't just unsee that or unfeel that. And that does add to increased empathy, to increased sensitivity to vibration, to light, to sound. Now, some of that can be really good. A practical example in my life was before DMT and like before the Monroe Institute. I would listen to a song and I would hear the bass beat and maybe the hook line and maybe the guitar riff. Where now I listen to and I'm pulling out 15 different chords and instruments and how they're all blending. And I'll watch a movie and I'm picking up every detail in the backdrop, including the main stuff. I'll walk through the woods and it's just overload of every insect, every bird, every crunch, every smell, every change of wind direction, every change of humidity. So it's a way more interactive, and I found fun way to interact in the world. But you walk into a room where people just got into a fight and there's negative dark shit and you feel it, and that empathy, sensitivity, it's like, ugh. Or you go into an airport. I was just in an airport the other day, and it's like the tenseness of that situation can be horrible. I was a substitute teacher for elementary school for several months in a really tough neighborhood, and man, I was coming home and I couldn't let their stories go. Like I was crying at the dinner table, trying to process all the shit that they had these little 6 and 7-year-olds had thrown at me. And so there are aspects like that where it's tough. But now and one of the chapters I write in the book is about transcendental sex, art, and science. Now, making love with DMT or psychedelics, all of those things amplified, absolutely amazing. Being creative and getting into a creative flow state with art. So whether you're making music, whether you're creative writing, whether you're doing a PhD thesis, you can, and not to say go do some DMT and you'll open up a whole new range, but I do have the analogy or story of, you can imagine an engineer working on a problem where they're just trying to solve it with the same things they've been thinking about and about the physics that they know of in this world. Well, you expand your knowledge basis and what information you can take, and you may be able to look at that problem in a whole new way. Same thing with medicine. You may be able to approach a problem in a whole new light by just having a different perspective. So heightened sensitivity can work in both ways.
What were you talking about?
Big picture, that there's other keys to unlock the human potential, and ultimately that was it. And DMT is one of those that it tells you, or not tells you, but that you're more than your physical body. You know that you have more than your five senses, and that you can not only have those, but you can dial those up, and that that there's a whole nother dimensional space out there that has information to be taken in, and sometimes that's just you as an elevated consciousness absorbing new information coming in, and sometimes it is that, like I said, interaction with non-physical sentient beings, and sometimes they fit the bill of the normal archetypes. And again, I think that's going to be culturally subjective, and I'm sure me being a 45-year-old white guy from New England is going to be different from many other people over the course of the country, but there are some common flavors and themes and messages that I think are received in these heightened states. And some things too, not even, we can talk about being trauma induced, or people that have near-death experiences. There was a well-known brain surgery doctor that had I think like meningitis or food poisoning, and he went into a coma and had this crazy near-death experience, and came back and kind of had to rewrite everything that he just trained his entire life for, and everything that he had practiced as a professional doctor, because it changed. We're more than the physical body, and if there is something that transcends that, or maybe not more, yes, more than a physical body, but that consciousness is not just confined to the brain, and that it's not the brain putting out consciousness, it's that somehow our body and our brain being part of that is receiving it, and that your brain can do some really weird stuff.
I wonder what, with these entities and when we start thinking about consciousness beyond the brain and opening up what we think about the nature reality is, how we should think about good versus evil. Because people do talk about demons and then, in the sort of evil sense, as, there are, well, obviously the etymology is like daimon, it's kind of spirit. Apparently even God could be called a daimon, yeah. Do you have any thoughts about that?
Yeah, you had a recent guest on, Richard Gallagher, and he was talking about exorcisms, and again, being trained where he's seen so many clinical cases, and then there's cases where there's something different. I've had, and I think rightly so, people raise the question to me, are you opening yourself up to possession, to demonic interaction, to all of that? And I think the short answer is probably yes. I mean, if you're heightening your sensitivity and you're allowing more information and more wavelengths of stuff in, is there potential to have it on both spectrums? I think yes. I think, though, the kind of purpose of doing the deep inner exploration is, like, I've already faced, in my opinion, the worst inner demons that I possibly could have. I say in colorful language, but like I've danced with the devil. I've been fucking stalked by the devil. I've battled that person. I've been every possible interaction that I've had in the depths of these trips. And some people call them bad trips. I've never had a bad trip. I wouldn't call it a bad trip. It's a necessary trip where you have to confront what you've been running from. But that ability, and it's not a cockiness or an arrogance. It goes with those badges that we just earned. Like, I've earned a certain amount of badges where I'm comfortable with my toolbox, my toolkit, what's in it, and what I've experienced to go exploring these realms. I have more curiosity than fear, but I'm also humble enough to know that I'm not immune to. I'm not some super enlightened soul that can't have nefarious interactions. Try to whatever interact with me, but part of listening to your body, part of listening to those trigger and warning signs, like I mentioned, is you become really, again, hypersensitive to that. So I hope I'm not being deceived, but I'm leaning into my intuition. I'm leaning into my gut. So whether it be walking through the marketplace, or whether it be somebody that comes into a work setting, or somebody in interaction with a spirit being in the DMT space, I feel like I have a really good filter for what their energy and what their intention is, and I'm not fearful of confronting the negative or the dark. And up until this point, I've come out on top of those interactions. Again, knock on wood, but there's not to say that there's nothing that I'm afraid of, but it's like I've been through so much of my own personal shit in hell that I know the worst aspects that I need to deal with are within me, and I've already named them, befriended them, and not necessarily put them in their place, because that acts like I'm like it's an equal understanding. But yeah, and I do feel that I have some really good guides or protectors, or I've had some really profound interactions with my protectors, my guardian angels, and I know that, again, maybe it's just me with this false sense of confidence, but once you've had a interaction with these protective energies and you're comfortable that they're there. Now, some people will call it Christ consciousness, there's interactions with known religious figures that give that same protective energies, but if you're walking around with a rosary bead or whatever, knowing that you've got some badass DMT entities protecting you, it kind of offers the same sense of protection. And
yeah, you talked about encountering the devil or whatever, but then it's like there's a difference. There's a way in which you can encounter something, and you might be like right there up against it, but in your heart you're not letting it into. You're not approaching it from a perspective of like, I want to align with this something that's evil, but rather like there's a reason why
it's
evil
not
entities
align
exist.
with it, but it's almost too kind of like not even battle it. It's just understand it for what it is. It's the opposite end of the spectrum, or it's the opposite end of the scale, excuse me, or it's everything is cyclical, and that's also something that, again, not trying to like dissolve the negative aspects of myself or say that there isn't evil or bad. It's more just, yeah, that's part of it, and what do you do about it? And it's, to me, I try to have an understanding about it as opposed to change it or push my will. And I'm also, I think this is where my personal experience is. I talked about how I'm all about love and light and connection, and I'm the guy that studies bugs and looks for puppies to go pet, and all of my jobs I have fun with. I really do. I'm like the 45-year-old guy that, like, if people are like, what is this guy doing? But I'm big in like coherent vibrational energy, and just think of like a tuning fork. I think if you put out and only allow good energies around you, I think you really do vibrate like energies, and you do radiate that out. So like I said, I'm being as sensitive as I am to what I'm letting in, but also what I'm putting out. I feel like I'm only playing good music because I'm only allowing good music to be played, and especially when I go into these psychedelic DMT states, not once have I ever done it without incredible intention, with prayer, with meditation, with and there's been multiple times when I went to do it and I just didn't. For some reason, it felt off, or it wasn't aligned, or I felt my gut intuition was maybe there was a bad energy out there. But every time I've done it, it's been with such respect, with reverence, with a true desire to show my appreciation and gratitude. So, I'm entering this space with those emotions and those intentions. Now, that being said, if there was somebody with that same molecule in a pipe sitting there at the top of a high rise in New York City being like, all right, how can I take out the world? How can I manipulate? How can I push this drug on people? It's going to give them a bunch of different ways to increase their ability to do that. So, are there pieces of shit out there smoking DMT trying to be bigger pieces of shit? Yeah, I'm not that naive to say that, but that's, I think, where there's people like me to hopefully battle them. And I'm comfortable to say that there's enough of us on this side, because there's, once you again, the same amount of love that I have for myself and respect for all the crap that I've been through, and I talk about like the energies that I let into myself, I extend that very easily to everybody else around me. So it's easy to have this bubble, but then it's easy to extend that to my inner circle of friends, and then the family, and then ideally, the street, the neighborhood, the community, where it just feels way better to interact and act like this, and just it's not so much about words, it's about actions, and people see me being the changed guy who was, again, the jerk, narcissistic, belligerent asshole that had everything on paper. I had all the money, all the houses, all the cars, all of the titles, but I was miserable. Where again, now I can be the example of just, and not that you have to do exactly what I do and have the same jobs and relationships or take the same path. It's more just, hey, if your life sucks, if you're banging your head against the wall, if you're getting that stressor or that signal that you need to change, don't ignore it. Whether it's a health issue or a mental issue, or a physical, mental, either one. Don't push it aside. And yeah, that's what I did.
I like this idea that we kind of receive the energies that are around us, and we amplify it if we decide to take these kinds of things. So it makes me think that somewhat simple experiences of anger, say, or that we're in, we might think, that's nothing, or we're tensing, and we're just in like a bad situation in life. Like we might think, it's fine, but like there's actually so then if you take DMT at that point, it's sort of then that the reflection of that state kind of hits you, and so,
well, just the power of intentional belief in what you're able to do. I don't know. I got off sidetracked with the point I was going to make. I was going to say something about like the placebo effect and how, like your intention. Oh, about resonating energies and vibrations. So it really is. If you're walking around every day and you're reading the newspaper and every article is again pissing you off, and everybody, your neighbor's a jerk, the mailman's a jerk, you're fighting with your wife, you're upset about what you're going to cook for dinner, you're upset that you have to like cook the dinner, then upset that the dishes have to be cleaned after dinner, and it's just like, if literally everything in your life is pissing you off, you're just going to get more of that. And whether it be, like I said, a tuning fork that will make a guitar string vibrate at that same tone, or there's a lot of cool videos about cymatics, I believe, like where they're putting like vibrational energies into water, and it's making all these really cool like mandala looking snowflake shapes, or people will freeze water when it's around a loving environment, or when it's in a stressed environment and the water freezes different. Plants grow differently, and there's all these. It's like if any one of those are true, and some of them may just be coincidence, but there's enough people that don't seem like they're just batshit crazy, that are doing it for the right reasons, that are saying, no, listen, there's something here. So, and the tuning fork thing to me is just, if you can have a simple example where you'd be like, no, there's no way you can transfer emotional energy or information energy, or you can't convey something from here over there with no physical connection. It's like there's so many things in our life that say, yes, you can do that. And a tuning fork is the perfect example, where it's like, oh yeah, watch, I'll make this shake from over here. And so if you're, and this is where the telepathic nonverbal children, there's so many beautiful stories where if there's a child that can't really talk and they're sitting in a corner and everybody's looking at that kid like they're some decrepit, person that's not worthy and they're lesser than a human, and then you walk in and you sit across the room and you start telepathically saying how beautiful they are, nice shoes, and start smiling, it's like you can have this really cool vibrational exchange of a lot of information. And in that case, it may be nonverbal, but that kid's going to pick up what you're doing because you're looking at him like he's a person, and you're having that interaction. And the same thing now when I was in my dark state, and I part of my journey was I took a year and a half off of work and traveled the country. So I lived in my car, I lived on beaches, I just traveled everywhere. But there was a good portion of that time where I'd walk with 2 lighters in my hands and like twist them and kind of like walk with them as I was twisting them, and I had this mean mug on my face, like red eyes glaring. And even in Vegas, no one came up to me with any street flyers, no one tried to solicit me for anything. Like the roads like parted ways. The cops just looked at me, and it was just because I think I was putting off that energy. Just and I'm not a big guy. I'm 180 pounds, so it wasn't like I'm this intimidating physical person, but I was just walking down that street with literally ready to burn anything that came into contact with me, as opposed to looking for the person that has that dark cloud and kind of going up to them, and maybe it's just a hey, hello, how are you? Maybe it's and part of my journey was interacting with some people that were in some pretty shitty places, and sometimes it's just a matter of saying, hey, I love you, brother, to a stranger. For someone that hasn't heard those words in years, that can be a profound thing to hear. And that's the energy to walk around. You walk around saying, I love you, brother. You go around giving the old lady a compliment on her hair, because, if an 80-year-old lady's still doing her makeup and putting on her jewelry, and they're like, tell her she looks beautiful. Because, man, that's, like, there was a hostess I went to the restaurant the other day, and she just had this beautiful smile, and I left, and I made it a point to tell her, you got a beautiful smile. I'm not trying to pick her up. It was really just I'm going to leave the restaurant with a genuine compliment to tell this woman that the world needs more of that beautiful smile. And it's just, again, I don't do that because I'm trying to be this like preacher guy trying to like whatever change the world with my philosophy. I'm doing it because it makes me feel good, because I don't the physiology and the actual chemical cascade of effects of being happy, content, blissful, not yelling, just feels so much better than tense and anxious and stress. And if I could tie it, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Go for it. No, yeah.
Well, I just talking about the physicality of how it all feels, and talking truly about the chemicals produced in this physical body and how great that feels. But we've talked about concepts about the soul and what is this higher self and these other kind of levels of consciousness. And that, as much as the physical part of not being stressed, not having headaches, not whatever, getting into fights, the fact that my soul, and I was mentioning this the other day, like, I think the goal of all of this, and the goal of any mental health journey or any exploration of self, is that if you can get your soul to be comfortable in your own skin, to be here, to be now, in my Earth Adam 45, and not to try to be a richer version, a healthier version, a sexier version, to have more money, to be past, to be future. You shouldn't aspire to be an alien at your own home planet, or an eagle, or a shark, or like, if your soul can be here right now, comfortable in your own skin, and not seek to be anywhere else, so that you can truly enjoy the moment and the second, to me, that's bliss. That's heaven on earth. That's when, if you wake up every day and you're not searching or seeking for something other than just what is right in front of you, with all the chaos and bullshit and uncertainty, that's beautiful. Like, when I had all the money and all of the stuff, and on paper I had everything, I was always looking for more, or to be different, or to have something else to make me complete, to have the external validation. What am I going to have if I do this? It was never just be here right now. And even me just saying that, I just got to blast the goosebumps, because it is just that fucking awesome to be able to do that, and to have your soul be comfortable, to be talking to you like right now. Yes, we're tired. Yes, we're going to take a break. We both have a lot going on. But man, this is exactly what I want to do right now with exactly you. And I'm not trying to butter you up, but it really is like, this is the divine plan. This is what I should be doing right now, somehow, some way. And it's great because I'm not thinking, shit, I should have been working, I'm missing out on pay, or what am I gonna, I gotta go do this. It's, no, I'm right here with you, and I'm engaged, and that feels great because I'm not elsewhere. And when I'm done with this, whatever I decide to do, whether it's get a bowl of cereal or go to the gym or take a ride, I'm going to be fully present during all of that. And you start doing that for days and weeks and months, and in my case now several years, you realize what it's like to not be stressed or anxious, to not be angry at everybody, to look at yourself in the mirror when you brush your teeth at night and be happy with who you are, with all of your scars and warts and all of your shit. And my prayers of gratitude that I have every night, and I go to bed, and it's not, God, please give me this, or I want this, or it's always about gratitude and appreciation and a recognition for all that I've had, good and bad. And you go to bed set in the mood like that with a gratitude and appreciation, and then you wake up the next day ready to experience anything that comes your way, and to know that any person or interaction that presents itself to you, there's a lesson there to be learned about yourself or about the world. Like, what can throw you off? Like, even a flat tire could be like, all right, well, cool, maybe I'll meet some hot chick on the side of the road, or maybe that just prevented me from, you can make us a way of the perspective shift to have it be where every part of being in your skin is fun. And from, being the 41-year-old suicidal, anxious guy that was literally ready to get out of my skin, and every moment was unbearable, to have every moment be blissful is, that's it, man. So psychedelics are not, for other people are not, is DMT for everybody? No. There may be some people watching this be like, oh man, why is he even talking about psychedelics? But I am not the only person that this has happened to, and the transformation is real. The information that's gained, whether it be just my brain producing it, or is it just me on some trip and I'm getting whatever, fake movies pumped into my head. Whatever it is, what happens in my day-to-day life is a real life example of it changed. It changed me, so it's real. The change is real.
So many fascinating things, and like it makes me want to understand scientifically so much about the world, because you bring up like the way emotions work and the way perception works. And I will be hopefully doing more podcasts on that, exploring these things. But I also, as you've been saying there, you're teaching me a lot about kind of how to approach life too, and hearing a lot of things like I probably need to hear. And can
I add one more tidbit to a young man, if I may? And I don't think this applies necessarily what your sexual orientation is, or it really anybody as they interact. To incorporate the masculine and feminine aspects of yourself, and you mentioned on several other podcasts about the Anima and Animus, and Jung's concept about the opposite, archetypal energies within each other. Part of my transformation, or part of my exploration, has really been unlocking both of those. And as you can see, I was just almost at the verge of tears. I talk about sympathy and empathy and love. I'm very connected with that feminine aspect of myself, where before it was that was a dark and ugly aspect. And if the women I was with didn't almost act like me, or agree like me, or do everything like me, it was an issue, and I would fight with them. And it's like, well, what the fuck? I don't want another guy. I want the feminine aspect. And I couldn't appreciate the difference of what the feminine aspect brought. And then once I was able to understand it more in other people, but then also myself, I was able to become way more of a whole person, where I can be the most gnarly, badass, masculine guy. I'm not intimidated by any situation or any person. I build houses. I've been in construction. I name all of the things. But I can also be the softest, most gentle aspect, and be comfortable in any situation. And because of that, that's allowed a fuller, more interaction with myself. And again, you listen to what Jung said. You listen to like the concept of like the Kundalini awakening, where these two aspects of yourselves are intertwining, where they do mix and come up. And I lost 3 long-term relationships that ended horribly, because I couldn't appreciate and understand the feminine aspect in general, let alone how it applied to my own inner workings. And now that I can do that, I have in 3.5 year relationship with this young lady who it's the most beautiful, intimate connection and communication that I've ever had with anybody. My relationship with my mom, my sister, my 2 nieces. I interact with every female in my life in a more complete whole way, and it's just allowed me to be a better, more alpha male, a more masculine in my own sense, but not push them away. And again, the practical application is in my other relationships, every little quirk that they would do could piss me off. So they left their shoes here, they put milk in the wrong place, they didn't clean up, they left hair on the brush, they didn't put the cap back on the toothpaste. All of the assortment of shit that typically people could get mad on, and then that just sets the mood for the day. The same thing now that my current girlfriend does, all her unique quirks, where every one of those things, and it's different. I'm so happy that her little shoes are here. Look how cute her feet are. I'm so happy that there's hair in my bathroom because that means she was here in the morning and she brushed her teeth. If she puts the milk in there like that, then every time I know she wants a glass of milk, I'll offer her the glass of milk and get her the favorite cup so I can put it away back. And it just becomes this whole cool interaction where everything I do, I look at her with more love and understanding, and it's like, wow, I'm so happy you're not some burly, nasty, hairy dude, and you're the cute little girl leaving her shoes by the door. And again, that perspective shift, it cost me 3 relationships with 3 amazing women, and as again a 45-year-old guy talking to a 20-something-year-old guy, if don't understand and appreciate the differences in your significant other and appreciate them for what they are, because that's what makes them beautiful and wonderful, and then incorporate that into yourself. Not to be preaching, but man, if I had somebody to have these conversations with me when I was a little bit younger, I think I could have saved a lot of heartache.
Things I've been talking about with friends, and yeah, that's really good. There's honestly so much I still want to ask you. This kind of just brings up more questions in a good way. But yeah, tell me any last words, and where do you want to point people, and maybe we can do this again.
So I appreciate any type of open-minded dialogue. I found that typically the people that are talking about DMT and psychedelics are humble, and they're not saying that they have all the answers or that it's the magic pill and you got to do this, and this. It more is just, listen, there's information here that shouldn't just be brushed away, that it is truly helping people, and just have an open mind to it. And my mother would be a great example of somebody. She's never going to do shrooms. She doesn't smoke DMT. It's just not for her, and it doesn't interest her. But 5 years ago, she probably would have been like, oh God, no, that's horrible. Anybody doing shrooms is doing drugs in there, whatever. Where now she can have a educated conversation with her hairdresser about DMT, ayahuasca, shrooms, how it's made, that, an educated conversation, and then say, oh yeah, and it saved my son's life, and, maybe your daughter, niece, whatever. And I think as long as those conversations can happen, you don't have to be pro psychedelics or even think it's, should be for you, but just don't shit on it for people that it can help or could potentially help. And I don't think there's any question that the data's out there, that there's people like me that we're on the planet now doing good things because of that plaque removal that psychedelics added. And if we're ending, I mentioned my book several times. Part of this story is not selling books and trying to promote DMT. It really is sharing that message. And I offer, if anybody wants a free copy, I'll happily send a PDF copy. Send me an email. I've sent paperback copies too, if anybody truly wants a copy and can't afford it. Or if somebody that they know is in a depressed, suicidal state and they think maybe my words could help. The point is get the message to them, and I'll make that happen if you're interested in it.
Thank you. Yeah, I appreciate this. And
I'm here for whatever. We can talk about aliens. We can talk about the DMT laser experiment, Monroe Institute, all of that good shit. Sex on DMT. That could be one for the college students.
A whole podcast. Yeah.
No, but I'm here. I'm available. I appreciate the time and energy you've spent with me, and honestly, your podcast is exactly what's needed, which is open discussion and dialogues where neither side is yelling at one another. And I find your content really enjoyable to watch and educational. So, thank you, and I'm grateful to be a small part of it.
Thank you. See you, Adam.
Take it easy.
Awesome.
Go get some sleep.